Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm sharing a story that's incredibly difficult, deeply personal, and, frankly, something I'm not proud of. But I believe there's immense value in being vulnerable and sharing our mistakes, especially when they can help others avoid similar pain. This is the true story of how I had an affair and how it ultimately destroyed my marriage. It's a raw account, from the very beginning to the heartbreaking end, and I hope it offers a clear look at the real cost of betrayal. It all started subtly, almost innocently. There were conversations, then late-night texts, and before I knew it, I was caught in a web of my own making. I started telling small lies, then bigger ones, each one digging me deeper into a hole I couldn't seem to climb out of. The emotional toll was immense. Constant anxiety, guilt gnawing at me, and the crushing weight of knowing I was deceiving the person I vowed to spend my life with. I rationalized. I deflected. I ignored the red flags screaming in my head. Looking back, I can see how each choice, each secret, chipped away not just at my marriage, but at my own integrity. Then came the moment everything unraveled. It was sudden, unexpected, and utterly devastating. The truth came out, and the world as I knew it crumbled. The pain in my spouse's eyes is something I'll never forget. A mixture of shock, heartbreak, and profound betrayal. There was no going back, no magic words to fix what I had broken. The consequences were swift and brutal. Arguments, tears, the agonizing process of separation, and eventually, divorce. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the shattering of a family, a home, and years of shared memories. Living with the regret of that mistake is a daily reality. The ripple effect of my actions touched so many lives beyond just mine and my spouse's. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. The allure of a momentary escape is never worth the devastation it can cause. The real cost of cheating is immeasurable, leaving a trail of broken trust and enduring pain. Thank you for listening to such a tough story. I truly hope that by sharing my experience, someone out there can learn from my mistakes and make different choices. If you found this video insightful, please consider giving it a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more honest conversations. Your support means a lot.
From the outside, my life was a goddamn postcard. A beautiful, successful wife, Sarah, with a laugh that could light up a room. A cozy suburban house with a perfectly manicured lawn. 2 golden retrievers who thought I hung the moon. We were the couple our friends pointed to and said, I want what they have. But postcards only show the pretty side. They don't show the cracks. They don't show the quiet dinners where the only sound was the clinking of cutlery. They don't show the careful distance in the bed we shared, a canyon disguised by expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was nothing. A comfortable, soul-crushing nothing. We were roommates who happened to be married. The cheating didn't start with a bang. It started with a like on a LinkedIn post. Her name was Chloe, a new graphic designer we'd hired at the agency. She was all sharp wit, messy buns, and a fire in her eyes that hadn't been dimmed by years of corporate compromise. We started talking about projects, then about music, then about life. It was a drip, drip, drip of attention that filled a void I didn't even know was there. The first time I lied, it was small. Working late on the Henderson account, honey. Don't wait up. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I typed it. The guilt was a physical weight in my stomach, but beneath the guilt was a thrill so electric it was terrifying. I was 34 years old, and for the first time in a decade, I felt alive. I met Chloe at a dimly lit wine bar across town, a place where no one knew my name. She was wearing a simple black dress, and when she smiled at me, it wasn't the polite, wifely smile I was used to. It was a secret, knowing smile, just for me. We talked for 3 hours. We laughed. I leaned in, hanging on her every word. When my hand accidentally brushed against hers on the table, a jolt shot up my arm. It was the most profound, most insignificant touch of my life. Driving home that night, the guilt came back, a cold, nauseous wave. I rolled down the window, trying to air out the smell of another woman's perfume that I was convinced was clinging to me. I scrubbed my hands raw in the kitchen sink, the scent of lavender soap failing to erase the memory of her skin. When I crept into bed, Sarah stirred. "You're home late," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," I whispered, my heart in my throat. "The Henderson account is a nightmare." She just sighed and rolled over. And in that moment, the lie settled in. It wasn't a temporary guest anymore. It had unpacked its bags. It had found a home. I stared at the ceiling. The ghost of Chloe's smile burned onto the back of my eyelids. I was a cheater, a liar. And the worst part? A treacherous, shameful part of me couldn't wait to do it again.
The lie was a seed, and I watered it with every secret smile, every deleted text message, every fabricated business trip. It took root in the fertile soil of my marriage's quiet discontent and grew into a tangled, thorny thing that threatened to consume everything. The first month was a high-wire act, performed entirely in the dark. My senses became hyper-attuned to the nuances of my own home. I learned to recognize the specific crunch of Sarah's car tires on the driveway gravel, giving me a precious 30-second window to close an incriminating browser tab or switch my phone's screen from a conversation with Chloe to a bland news article. I became a master of the pocket text, my thumb a blur of motion under the dinner table, crafting replies like, "Can't talk now," "In a meeting," "Miss you." The guilt was a constant, low-grade hum in the background, like a faulty appliance you learn to ignore. Chloe was intoxicating. Where Sarah was stability and quiet comfort, Chloe was chaos and adrenaline. She didn't want to talk about mortgage rates or whose turn it was to take the dogs to the vet. She wanted to sneak onto the rooftop of my office building after hours and share a bottle of cheap wine, the city lights sprawled out beneath us like a stolen treasure. She made me feel reckless and young, a version of myself I thought had been erased by years of responsibility. "Tell me something true," she whispered to me one afternoon in an anonymous hotel room, the sheets tangled around our legs. "Something you've never told anyone else." And I did. I told her about my fear of failure, my secret dream of quitting my job and writing a novel, the deep childhood shame of my father walking out, things I had never fully voiced to Sarah, because in our comfortable life, there was no room for such messy, inconvenient truths. Chloe collected these confessions like jewels, her eyes wide with empathy. It was the most intimate I had felt with another person in years, and it was built on a foundation of lies. Back home, the lies began to mutate, to require their own ecosystem of support. A team-building weekend for work was actually a 2-day escape to a bed and breakfast 3 towns over with Chloe. To sell it, I had to invent colleagues, a Dave from accounting who was a prankster, a Melissa from marketing who was a wine connoisseur. I described them to Sarah with such detail that they almost felt real to me. I was no longer just lying about my whereabouts. I was building a phantom office, populating it with ghosts, all to cover my tracks. Sarah, for her part, seemed to accept it all. She was busy with her own life, her own career as a landscape architect. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me across the room, a faint line of confusion between her brows. "You've been different lately," she said one evening as we were loading the dishwasher, a simple, offhand comment that sent a bolt of pure panic straight through me. "Different how?" I asked, my voice a little too casual as I carefully slotted a plate into the rack. "I don't know. distant, but also energized. It's like you're buzzing with some secret current. She shrugged, wiping her hands on a towel. Must be that big project you're working on, the Henderson account. The Henderson account, my catch-all excuse, my alibi for a life I wasn't living. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. It's a real grind, but exciting. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. It was a calculated move, a husbandly gesture designed to reassure. She leaned back into me for a moment, a soft sigh escaping her lips. And in that moment, I hated myself more than I ever thought possible. I was betraying both of them, Chloe with this embrace, and Sarah with every single beat of my traitorous heart. The breaking point, the first real crack in the facade, came on a Tuesday. I was meeting Chloe for a quick lunch at a park downtown. It was a calculated risk, but we were careful, sitting far from the main paths. We were laughing, sharing a bag of chips, our knees touching. For a few stolen minutes, the double life didn't feel heavy, it felt light. And then I saw him, Mark, Sarah's brother. He was standing maybe 50 yards away, holding his toddler's hand, his face a mask of stunned confusion as he looked directly at me. Our eyes locked for a horrific second that stretched into an eternity. I saw the moment of recognition, the moment he processed the woman I was with, the intimate way we were sitting, the fact that I was supposed to be in a client lunch. I jerked my knee away from Chloe's as burned. Oh God. What? She asked, her smile fading. Sarah's brother, he just saw us. The color drained from Chloe's face. The carefree, adventurous glint in her eyes was instantly replaced by fear. What are you going to do? My mind was a screaming void. I had no plan. The delicate house of cards I had built was trembling in the wind. I drove back to the office in a cold sweat, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The text message came through an hour later. It was from Mark. No greeting, no preamble, just 5 words that felt like a death sentence. We need to talk tonight. The game was up. The high wire act was over and I was in free fall. The rest of the day was a blur of terror and frantic, desperate planning. What could I say? That Chloe was a client? A long-lost cousin? Every lie I concocted sounded more flimsy and pathetic than the last. That evening, I walked into my own home like a man heading to the gallows. The dogs wagged their tails, oblivious. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio as she chopped vegetables for dinner. "Hey you," she said, smiling over her shoulder. "You're home early." The normalcy of it was a physical blow. This was the life I had been poisoning from the inside out. Before I could say a word, the doorbell rang. My blood ran cold. I knew who it was. Sarah wiped her hands on a towel. "I'll get it." "No," I said, a little too sharply. "I'll get it." I walked to the front door, each step feeling like I was wading through cement. I could see Mark's silhouette through the frosted glass. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my hand hovering over the doorknob. This was it. The moment my 2 lives collided, and everything I had built, the postcard, the facade, the beautiful, comfortable lie, was about to shatter into a million pieces.
Time didn't slow down. It fractured. Standing at that door, with the shape of my brother-in-law solidifying through the glass, my mind didn't race through 1,000 scenarios. It just went blank. A silent, white scream of pure terror. My hand, slick with sweat, closed around the cold brass of the knob. I turned it. Mark stood on the porch, his face a thundercloud. He'd always been a friendly, easygoing guy, the kind who remembered your favorite beer and would help you move a couch on a Saturday without a second thought. That man was gone. In his place was a stranger with a clenched jaw and eyes that held a cold, hard fury. "Mark, hey," I said, the words too loud, too forced.
I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door mostly shut behind me, a futile attempt to keep the two halves of my life from touching. "What's up, man?" He didn't buy the act for a second. He just stared at me, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerously calm. "Don't you dare hey man me. What the hell was that today, Leo?" What was what? The lie was a reflex, a desperate, flailing limb. "In the park, with that woman. Don't insult my intelligence. Who is she?" The porch light flickered on above us, casting a harsh yellow glow. Sarah must have hit the switch from inside. I could feel her presence just beyond the door, a listening silence. "She's a client," I stammered, the lie pathetic even to my own ears. "We were going over some last-minute campaign visuals. It was just a working lunch." "A working lunch," Mark repeated, the words dripping with disdain. "You were sharing a bag of chips. You were laughing, like you were in love with her. I have eyes, Leo. I am not an idiot." The front door creaked open. Sarah stood there, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning concern. "Mark, Leo, is everything okay? Why are you two standing out here in the cold?" We both turned to her. Mark's face was a mask of conflicted rage, loyalty to his sister warring with his disgust for me. My own face, I'm sure, was a pale canvas of guilt. "Everything's fine, Sarah," I said quickly, my voice cracking on the second word. "Just work stuff. Mark had a question about a project." Sarah's eyes, sharp and intuitive, flickered from my panicked face to Mark's stony one. She knew. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew the tune of this conversation was all wrong. This wasn't a chat about work projects. "Mark?" she asked, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. Mark looked at her, and his anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a profound sadness. He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. He couldn't do it. He couldn't be the one to drop the bomb on her doorstep, not like this. "It's nothing, sis," he said, the lie costing him visible effort. "Just guy stuff. I'll call you tomorrow." He shot me a final searing look that promised this wasn't over, then turned and walked back to his car without another word. The silence he left behind was heavier than any shouting could have been. Sarah and I stood on the porch, the chill of the evening seeping into our bones. "What was that really about, Leo?" she asked, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "It was nothing. He's just stressed about work, I think. Took it out on me." I moved to go inside, to escape the inquisition, but she didn't budge. "He looked at you like he hated you." My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "He's just being dramatic. Come on, let's go in. Dinner's probably burning." I brushed past her into the warm, familiar scent of our home. It now felt like a trap. I had survived the initial impact, but the damage was done. The foundation was cracked. Mark knew, and he was a loose cannon, a ticking bomb of truth fueled by brotherly protectiveness. The next 48 hours were a special kind of hell. My phone was a live wire. Every text notification made me jump. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Sarah's phone to ring with Mark on the other end, for a furious email to land in my inbox, for him to show up at my office. I texted Chloe, a frantic shorthand account of what happened. Me, Mark saw us at the park. He confronted me at my house. He knows. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, and appeared again for a long time. Chloe, what did you tell him? Me, that you were a client. He didn't believe me. Chloe, what does this mean, Leo? What if he tells her? Her fear was a palpable thing through the screen. The adventure, the thrill, was gone, replaced by the cold, hard reality of potential ruin. I had to get to Mark. I had to try and contain this. I called him a dozen times. It went straight to voicemail. I drove by his house, but his car was gone. He was ghosting me, letting me stew in my own panic, which was somehow worse than a direct confrontation. Meanwhile, at home, Sarah was a quiet storm. She was watching me, studying me the way she studied a landscape blueprint, looking for flaws in the design. She was distant, quieter than usual. The easy rhythm of our coexistence was gone, replaced by a tense, listening silence. She knew I was hiding something. The seed of doubt Mark had planted was taking root. I finally got a break on the third day. I saw Mark's car in the parking lot of the local grocery store. I pulled in, my tire screeching slightly, and practically leapt out of my car. He was just loading bags into his trunk when I approached him. "Mark, please, we have to talk." He slammed his trunk shut and turned to face me. The anger was still there, but it was colder now, more controlled. "I have nothing to say to you, Leo. Please, just let me explain." "What explain?" he spat. "Explain how you're betraying my sister? Explain how you're lying to her face every single day? I saw you with that woman. You looked happy. Happier than you've looked with Sarah in years. Don't try to cheapen it now by calling it a mistake." "It's complicated," I said, the weakest defense in the history of infidelity. "No, it's not. It's really simple. You're a cheat. You're breaking her heart. And for what? Some midlife crisis fling?" "It's not like that." The protest was automatic, but it rang hollow. "Then what is it like, Leo? Enlighten me. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't drive to my sister's house right now and tell her everything I saw." I was backed into a corner, out of lies, out of excuses. All I had left was a desperate, pathetic plea. "Because I'll end it," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Just give me a chance to end it myself, to fix this. If you tell her, you'll destroy her. You'll destroy everything. Let me do it the right way. Please, Mark." He stared at me, his eyes searching mine for any shred of sincerity. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of passing cars. "1 week," he said finally, his voice like gravel. "You have 1 week to tell her. If you don't, I will. And if you think what I'll do is destructive, Leo, it's nothing compared to what will happen if she finds out from someone else after I gave you this chance." He got into his car without another word and drove off, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot, the weight of his ultimatum crushing me. 1 week. 7 days to dismantle the double life I had so carefully constructed. 7 days to break Chloe's heart. 7 days to look my wife in the eye and confess that I was a liar and a cheat, and in doing so, destroy the only stable, good thing I had ever known. I had traded the thrill of a secret for the terror of a deadline. And as I got back into my car, the silence was no longer just quiet. It was the calm before the storm I had created, and it was counting down, second by agonizing second.
7 days to tear down the world I had built and face the wreckage. Mark's ultimatum was a bomb in my pocket, ticking so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The first day, I moved through my life like a ghost. I went to work, sat in meetings, and designed logos, all while my mind screamed in a silent, panicked loop. 1 week. 1 week. I had to end it with Chloe. That was the first, non-negotiable step. The thought of it sent a physical pain through my chest, a sharp, grieving ache. It wasn't just about ending the affair. It was about murdering the man I became with her, the reckless, desired, alive man. I was about to voluntarily step back into the quiet, suffocating cage of my own making. Only now the bars would be made of Sarah's justified anger and my own shame. I texted her. No romance, no pretense. "Me, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the usual place tomorrow, 7 p.m.? The reply was immediate. "Chloe, is this it? Is this the end?" I couldn't bring myself to type the words. "Me, please, just be there." That night, Sarah made my favorite meal, lasagna, with the garlic bread she knows I love. The smell that usually felt like comfort now felt like an accusation. She was trying. She had sensed the shift, the tension with Mark,
my own distracted silence, and her response was to pour more love into the cracks, to try and fix whatever she thought was broken. The kindness was a knife in my gut. "You've been quiet," she said, pushing a piece of garlic bread around her plate. "Just the Henderson account," I mumbled, the old, tired lie feeling more vile than ever. "It's hitting a critical phase." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Leo, if something's wrong, you can talk to me. We can talk about anything." "I'm having an affair. I've been lying to you for months. Your brother knows and has given me a week to tell you, or he will." The words were right there, a bitter pill on my tongue, but I looked at her face, so full of concern and love, and I choked. I couldn't do it, not over lasagna. "I know, honey," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. My skin felt like it was crawling. "It's just work, I promise." The next evening, I drove to the hotel bar where it had all begun. This time, there was no thrill, only a heavy, cold dread. Chloe was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked beautiful and tired. She had been crying. I slid into the seat opposite her. "Hey." "Don't hey me, Leo," she said, her voice raw. "Just say it." So I did. I told her about Mark's ultimatum. I laid it all out, not as a confession, but as a surrender. I was a man out of moves. "So that's it," she said, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "You're just going to go back to her after everything we have?" "I don't have a choice, Chloe. If I don't tell her, he will, and it'll be so much worse." "There's always a choice," she hissed, leaning forward, her eyes blazing. "You're choosing them. You're choosing the safe, boring life over us. You're a coward, Leo." The word hit its mark. She was right. I was a coward. I was too cowardly to leave my marriage, and now I was too cowardly to face the consequences without destroying the affair first. "It's not that simple," I pleaded, but the words were empty. "It is that simple," she said, her fire suddenly extinguishing into a cold, weary resignation. She slid out of the booth. "You know, I actually thought you were different. I thought you were brave, but you're just like all the rest. You want the affair, but you don't want the fallout." She looked down at me, and there was no love left in her eyes, only a profound and final disappointment. "Goodbye, Leo. Don't contact me again." And she walked out. Just like that, the door to the bar swung shut behind her, and the space where she had been felt vast and empty. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting, just a quiet, devastating end. The high was over. The hangover was here, and it was going to last a lifetime. I drove home, numb. The hardest part was still ahead of me. I had 6 days left on Mark's clock. The weight of the impending confession was a physical pressure on my chest, making it hard to breathe. For the next few days, I tried to find the right moment, the right words. I'd open my mouth as we got ready for bed, only to lose my nerve. I'd practice the speech in the car, but the words would dissolve when I walked through the front door. Sarah, sensing my turmoil, became even more attentive, more loving. She started planning a weekend getaway, just to reconnect. Every sweet gesture was another turn of the screw. With 3 days left, the pressure became unbearable. I was having trouble sleeping. My appetite was gone. I was a ghost haunting my own life. On the 6th night, a Saturday, I broke. We were watching a movie, some forgettable comedy, and she laughed at a stupid joke. It was her real, unguarded laugh, the one I'd fallen in love with. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't live with the lie for one more second. I couldn't let Mark be the one to erase that laugh. I picked up the remote and muted the TV. Sarah looked at me, puzzled. "What's wrong? You don't like the movie?" "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling so badly I barely recognized it, "we need to talk." The shift in the room was instant. The cozy, relaxed atmosphere vanished, replaced by a charged, electric dread. She slowly sat up straight, pulling the blanket up to her chin like a shield. She knew. Whatever was coming, she knew it was bad. "Okay," she said, her voice small. "Talk." I took a deep, shuddering breath. There was no elegant way to say it, no soft landing. "It's about Mark," I began. "The reason he was so angry, it's because he saw me in the park with a woman." I watched the words land on her. I saw the confusion first, then the dawning comprehension, and finally the raw gut punch of betrayal. Her face crumpled, the color draining from it so completely she looked like a black and white photograph. "What?" she whispered, the word a breath of pain. And so I started to talk. I didn't give her details. I didn't say Chloe's name. I just laid out the bare, ugly facts. That it had been going on for months, that I had lied about working late, about business trips, that I was a cheater and a liar. My voice was a monotone, a recitation of my own crimes. I was the prosecutor and the defendant in my own living room. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She just listened, her eyes wide and unblinking as I systematically destroyed our life together. When I finally finished, the silence in the room was absolute and deafening. She stood up. The blanket fell to the floor. She walked to the mantelpiece and looked at our wedding photo, her back to me. Her shoulders were rigid. Then she turned around, and the look on her face wasn't of sadness. It was one of pure, undiluted fury. "Get out," she said, her voice low and shaking with rage. She grabbed a vase from the side table, a wedding gift, and hurled it at the wall next to my head. It exploded in a shower of glass and water. "Get out of this house! Get out of my sight! I can't even look at you!" I stumbled to my feet, my own tears now falling. "Where will I go?" "I don't care," she roared. "To her, to a hotel, to hell for all I care. Just get out." I saw it then, the complete and total devastation. The postcard was burned, the facade was gone, all that was left was the wreckage. I turned and walked out the front door. I didn't take a bag, I didn't take my phone charger, I just left. As I got into my car, I heard a sound from inside the house that I will never forget for as long as I live. It was a raw, guttural, animal sob of pure, unadulterated pain. I did that. I broke the woman I vowed to love and protect. I started the car and drove away into the night, a man with no home, no future, and a guilt so immense I was sure it would swallow me whole. The web of lies was finally completely torn apart, and we were both trapped in the sticky, ruined threads.
I drove until the gaslight came on, parked in the vast, fluorescent-lit emptiness of a 24-hour supermarket parking lot, and curled up in the driver's seat. The vinyl creaked with every shaky breath I took. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face. The moment the fury had shattered into that primal, gut-wrenching sob. The sound was on a loop in my head. I didn't sleep. I just hovered in a state of nauseous, hyper-aware shock. I was homeless. I was a monster. The next morning, I used my credit card to book a week at a soulless, extended-stay hotel near the highway. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. It was the physical manifestation of my life now, cheap, temporary, and deeply lonely. I bought a change of clothes and a phone charger from a nearby big box store. The normalcy of the other shoppers, pushing carts full of groceries and family-sized packages of toilet paper, felt like an assault.
My world had ended, and theirs was just continuing. I called Mark. He answered on the first ring. I told her, I said, last night, I'm out. I'm at a hotel. There was a long silence on the other end. I heard him let out a long, weary breath. How did she take it? How do you think she took it, Mark? The words came out harsher than I intended. She threw a vase at my head and told me to get out. Good, he said, and the word was cold and final. Don't call me again. You deal with the mess you made. You don't get to use me as a lifeline. Click. I was utterly alone. Work was a special kind of torture. Walking back into the office where every corner held a memory of a secret text exchanged with Chloe felt like walking through a crime scene. My colleagues knew something was wrong. The buzz of my formerly perfect life collapsing through the office gossip line at lightning speed. I saw the sidelong glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the break room. I was a pariah. The only communication from Sarah came through her lawyer 3 days later, a formal email outlining the terms of our separation. I was to have no contact with her except through legal channels. I was to continue paying the mortgage and all household bills. I was to arrange a time, through her lawyer, to collect my personal belongings from the house when she was not present. The day I went to get my things was one of the most humiliating of my life. I pulled up to the house I owned, my key no longer welcome. Sarah's best friend Maya was there to supervise, her arms crossed, her face a mask of pure contempt. She stood in the doorway, a silent sentinel, as I moved through the rooms like a ghost. The house was different. It felt still and heavy. Our wedding photo was gone from the mantel. The vase she'd thrown was cleared away, but a faint water stain marked the wall. She had packed my clothes and books into a dozen cardboard boxes that sat in the middle of the living room floor. It was a neat, efficient eviction. She hadn't just packed my clothes and books, she had packed away my presence, erasing me from our shared history with a brutal, surgical precision. As I carried the last box to my car, I saw one of the dogs, Buddy, watching me from the top of the stairs, his tail tucked between his legs. He whined softly. He didn't understand why I was leaving. I couldn't even say goodbye to him. Weeks bled into a month. My life became a grim routine. The sterile hotel room, the silent office, dinners eaten alone at the bar of a chain restaurant. I tried calling Chloe once, driven by a desperate, pathetic need for a connection to the person who had, however wrongly, made me feel alive. The number was no longer in service. She had vanished, a ghost from a life that no longer existed. She had been right. I was a coward, and now I had nothing to show for it but the consequences. The guilt was a constant companion. It wasn't just the sharp, acute pain of the initial betrayal anymore. It had metastasized into a chronic, dull ache that lived in my bones. I missed Sarah with a physical intensity that surprised me. I missed the stupid, mundane things, the way she hummed off-key in the shower, the specific brand of coffee she bought, the weight of her foot against mine at bed at night. I had taken it all for granted, traded it for a cheap thrill, and now the silence of my existence was a punishment I deserved. After 6 weeks, her lawyer contacted me again. Sarah was willing to meet, for mediation. Not for reconciliation, she made that clear, but to discuss the terms of our divorce without a drawn-out, expensive court battle. We met in a neutral, beige-colored conference room. She arrived with her lawyer. She was thinner, and there were new, fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she held herself with a steely composure that was more intimidating than her previous rage. She wouldn't look at me directly. Her gaze would sweep over me, through me, as if I were a piece of furniture. We discussed assets, the house, the retirement accounts. It was a brutal, clinical dissection of a shared life. I agreed to everything. I gave her the house. I gave her most of the savings. I didn't fight. What right did I have? I was paying a financial penance for a moral crime, and it would never be enough. At the end of the meeting, as the lawyers were packing their briefcases, she finally spoke to me directly. "Why, Leo?" Her voice was quiet, stripped of all emotion. It was the question I'd been asking myself for 2 months. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the depth of the damage I had caused. There were no good answers, no excuses. I was selfish, and I was weak. I was bored and unhappy, and instead of talking to you, instead of trying to fix what was wrong with us, I took the easy way out. I destroyed the best thing I ever had because I was a coward. There is no reason that will ever be good enough. I am so sorry, Sarah. I am so sorry. It was the first completely honest thing I had said to her in over a year. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She just nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, as if my confession had finally confirmed some terrible truth she already knew. "I know you are," she whispered. Then she stood up, turned, and walked out of the room. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty chair where she had been. The divorce would be finalized, the legal ties would be severed, but the other ties, the shared memories, the love that had curdled into betrayal, the guilt, the pain, those would remain. They were a part of me now, a scar on my soul. I wanted excitement. I wanted to feel alive. And now, sitting alone in that beige room, I understood the cost. I was alive, all right. I was alive with a pain so profound and so permanent that I would carry it for the rest of my days. The cheating was over. The lying was over. Now there was only the long, quiet, and deserved task of learning to live with the man I had become.
2 years later, the divorce papers were a distant memory, filed away in a cardboard box with other artifacts from a life I no longer lived. The sharp, screaming pain had subsided, replaced by a constant, low-frequency hum of regret. It was the emotional equivalent of a phantom limb, an ache for something that was no longer there, a ghost of a life I had willingly dismembered. I lived in a small, functional apartment now. It had white walls and a view of another brick building. It was clean, quiet, and held no memories. It was a place to sleep, not a home. I'd gotten a new job at a smaller, less prestigious firm. The work was the same, but the office politics were simpler. I was just Leo, a quiet, competent designer who kept to himself. No one knew my past. No one asked about a wife. I saw Sarah once, about a year after the divorce was finalized. It was a random, brutal twist of fate in a downtown coffee shop. She was with a group of women, probably from her work. She was laughing, and for a fleeting second, it was the same laugh that had once been the soundtrack to my life. She looked better. Her eyes had a light that I had extinguished. She hadn't seen me, and I ducked out before she could, my heart hammering a frantic, shameful rhythm against my ribs. Seeing her heal was a relief and a punishment all at once. I was glad she was moving on, but the evidence that she could,
That the world continued to spin without me was a lonely realization. I tried dating again after a year or so. A well-meaning colleague set me up with a nice, kind woman named Rachel. She was a teacher with a warm smile and a gentle disposition. We went to a movie, and then for dinner, she asked me about my past, and I gave her the sanitized version. I was married. It didn't work out. She was empathetic, but I could feel the walls I had built around myself, thick and impenetrable. I was going through the motions, a hollow man pretending to be whole. I never called her for a second date. It wasn't fair to her. I was still married to my guilt. The affair with Chloe felt like a story I had read about someone else, a reckless, foolish character in a book I no longer wanted to open. The thrill was a distant, cheap memory, utterly worthless when held against the price I had paid. I had traded a temporary high for a permanent emptiness. Mark's words in the grocery store parking lot echoed in my mind with the clarity of prophecy. "You're a cheat. You're breaking her heart, and for what? Some midlife crisis fling?" He had seen it with perfect, brutal accuracy. One evening, I found myself driving past our old house. Her house now. I didn't stop. I just slowed down. The lawn was still perfectly manicured, but the flower beds were different. She had planted new things, bold colors I wouldn't have chosen. The porch light was a different style. It was no longer our house. It was hers. She had reclaimed it, imprinted it with her own spirit, one that was no longer intertwined with mine. It was a healthy, necessary sight, but it felt like a final, silent goodbye. I drove back to my silent apartment. I poured a glass of water and stood at the window, looking out at the lit-up windows in the building across the street. In each one there was a life, a story. Some were probably happy, some were sad, some were tangled in their own complex webs. I wondered if any of them felt as alone as I did. The truth I had learned, the hard, unglamorous truth, is that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And Sarah had reached indifference. My punishment was not her anger, it was my own memory. It was the permanent knowledge of what I had done and the unending silence that was my life now. I had wanted to feel alive, and in destroying everything, I had succeeded. I was now acutely, painfully aware of every single moment, every breath, every heartbeat in the quiet of my own solitude. This was the aftermath. This was the rest of my life. Not a dramatic explosion, but a long, slow, quiet settling of dust. And in the stillness, I finally understood. The web of lies had not just trapped Sarah, it had cocooned me. And when it was torn away, there was nothing left inside but the faint, echoing whisper of the man I used to be, and the chilling silence of the man I had become.